Hey everyone, welcome back. My name's dustinkreis, and today we are going to do a game discussion, and we're going to talk about Brandish, the Dark Revenant, brought to us by Falcom and Xseed. And this is a 2009 PSP game that Xseed decided to localize and bring out over here on PSN. They've been doing that a lot recently, a lot of PSN downloadable titles, and you know, for a game like this, it just works. We always talk about how we want, you know, physical copies and all that, but there's just something kind of convenient about games like this just being downloadable. And I gotta be honest with you, when Xseed announced that they were going to bring this game out, I was not too excited about it. I remember reading a lot about Brandish because it's actually a remake of an old... it was on a lot of systems back in the day, but I remember it mainly on the Super Nintendo. And it had a really weird control scheme where when you can move forward and backwards with the directional pad, but when you hit the left directional or the right directional, instead of turning and moving that way, the character just kind of sidesteps. And you actually turn your character using the trigger buttons. And on the Super Nintendo, I guess, it's a very nauseating experience, the way that the screen turns around your character, because your character is sort of always facing north, and the map kind of turns around you. It's been fixed a lot for this PSP remake, but I just remember it just seeming... not very interesting, you know, just something that I was like, all right, well, I can see them bringing that out. And then RPG Swagman kind of started talking about it and how much he was enjoying it. I was like, well, maybe, you know, I'll check this thing out. And I downloaded it and started playing it, and man, I got hooked. It's a over-the-top dungeon crawler, and it's a very sort of different game. It's not very... It's weird how it's like an action game and a puzzle game and like a strategy game all in one. You're fighting for position with enemies all the time, and at times it can feel a little slow, and at times it can be very frustrating, but it kind of has what I imagine people get out of the Dark Souls series, that desire to push forward, the risk-reward of, you know, using some of the game mechanics to heal your character, and kind of, I don't want to say punishing difficulty, but it is challenging in certain places. And you know, it's just a really surprising game. I was really surprised at how much I actually enjoyed the game. I wasn't expecting anything really out of it, but man, it really kind of just blew me away how addicted I got to the game. And yeah. So anyway, do these things as we normally do. The storyline, this is a port of a very old game. So the storyline is bare bones at best. You play as a character named Ares, and there's a little bit of a backstory between Ares and this other character in the game called Della. Can never say anything right. Character named Della. And basically, Ares has killed Della's master, and now Della is out for revenge, and she has chased him to this area, and lo and behold, Ares falls into a pit and is found, or he wakes up in this ruin with a huge tower leading back up to the overworld. So he's in this huge cave or these ruins and this huge tower, and it's your job as Ares to traverse the ruins and then traverse the tower and wherever else that may lead. It's a really cool world that Falcom has made for this game. The storyline is bare bones at best. You get a little bit of the history of this ruins and towers, and then Ares and Della have a little bit of a conversation, you know, every time they run into each other. But for the most part, the game is just straight dungeon crawling. And, you know, for a storyline perspective, if you're playing this game for a story, it's from the era of video games where the story wasn't the main push. It was more just to kind of keep you moving along. And I liked, you know, sort of the bare bonesness of it. It kind of reminded me a lot of when I played games as a kid, and I would create my own story as I played it. You know, like Super Metroid, I would create my own story as I was moving through the planet. So you kind of get a little bit of that action if that, you know, if modern society hasn't driven your imagination out of your head. But yeah, storyline is good. The characters, especially Della, you'll have a lot of fun with Della because she's always trying to capture Ares, and then she always just fails at it. And it's pretty funny to see her interactions sometimes because she always inevitably springs a trap, and it leads to her, you know, disappearing again for a while. But Ares is your typical silent protagonist, never really talks back or anything like that. The gameplay is the big thing about this game. Like I said, it's a dungeon crawler. You're just stuck in these huge environments, and you kind of just have to slowly make your way through it. You have a very large amount of items to help you get through this because there's all kinds of traps you have to avoid. You have to avoid pit traps, spike traps. You know, there's breakable walls. There's all these hidden things in the game, and it's really fun to just explore these dungeons and avoid the traps and the enemies. And you know, the combat can be a little slow. I know Aerodynamish is playing the game right now, or he was, and he wasn't really feeling it. So I know it can be a bit sluggish. The game is kind of a slow playing game. This is not a hack and slash RPG like Ys, even though a lot of times you might get kind of an Ys vibe with the music and the environments and the way the story is presented and things like that. This is not Ys at all. It's a very different style of game. A lot more strategic. You move on a grid-based pattern. Enemies move on a grid-based pattern. And it's, even though it's like an action game, it has a turn-based feel because enemies will come at you, and if you're facing them, whenever they strike, you don't have to hit a button. Your character will automatically block that strike with a shield. And it's really about timing and positioning to attack these enemies. You know, an enemy will strike and you'll block the shield, and you'll quickly counter strike and then get, you know, back into position before the enemy strikes again. Some enemies are not damageable by weapons, so you have to use your magic. Some enemies are not damageable by magic, so you have to use your swords. And it starts off feeling really easy. You're like, oh my god, this is like the easiest game ever. And then you start getting into these rooms where like 8 enemies are there at the same time, and you just have to kind of shuck and jive around and you know, sidestep and things like that to just damage random enemies until you can finally get some to kill. A lot of times you're really just fighting the dungeon itself, though. I died a lot of times just by falling into a pit. It's not an instant kill, but it takes off a substantial portion of your health. And you get into these rooms where you don't know like what's a pit trap and what's a floor, and you have to use these little stones to break the floor. And there was, you know, some rooms where it's just like the entire room is a pit trap except for this one little, you know, path through the room, and it takes a long time to get through this game. There's a lot of trial and error, a lot of slow progression as you figure out, you know, what's a trap and what's not, and for some reason it just gets super addictive. It's not as hard as a roguelike, because if you die, you have these items that you can, it's like a bread that you can break, and when you break it, it creates a retry point, so that's where you'll start from. You can save anywhere in the dungeon, and that also creates a retry point. So it's not impossible. It's just kind of I don't even want to say a punishing game. It's just sometimes a frustrating game. The big thing about the combat that I forgot to say is that weapons are oh, what's the word I want to use? They only have a certain number of uses before they break. Ugh, God. Um, you will find infinite swords in the game, but they're always weaker than the break or the breakable swords until the very end of the game when you get the most powerful sword in the game and it's infinite and insanely powerful. But you're always kind of managing inventory. The big thing about this game is inventory management because you only have a certain number of slots and you're always finding things. Luckily, if you find, say, 2 healing potions, you can stack those items and it only take up 1 slot. You cannot stack weapons and armor, though. So as you're finding items and you're kind of debating on, okay, do I need to keep this sword or do I want to pick up this piece of armor? Luckily, you find a bunch of, they're called otherworld chests, and basically it just gives you 9 more slots on your inventory. So you have a total of 36 slots by the end of the game. But starting off, I mean, you're really kind of cramped in your inventory. And when you have to carry around items like sledgehammers to break down walls and these, marbles to break the floors and stuff, things can get a little tight, and you really have to start making some big decisions. Luckily, there are shops in the dungeons that you can sell off unused items and unused armor and things like that, and buy new magic, buy new weapons. Although really, I didn't buy a lot of weapons. You will find a lot of swords and stuff to use. The big thing you want to buy is the new armors, and they get ridiculously expensive. Luckily, a lot of enemies drop gold bars, which can be sold for 1,000 gold apiece. So I never really had any trouble getting money or leveling up. The main trouble I had with the game is sometimes it's a Falcom game. Sometimes the bosses feel a bit unfair, especially when you get to that final boss. I don't know what it is about Falcom games, but it's like you can just be playing along, having a good time, and then you get to that final boss and it's like an impossible nightmare. And it took me a while to beat that final boss. I don't know, it's just something about Falcom games. It always happens with Ys. It's happened with Brandish. It's just kind of a Falcom trait, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's just a kind of a slow playing, addictive game. And if it really sinks its claws into you, you're not going to be able to put the game down. Like I couldn't put the game down. And when I wasn't playing it, I wanted to play it. I mean, I don't know why it excited me so much. It's a weird game to like get that addicted to, but I really got, addicted to it. The graphics, it's a PSP game on the Vita, so it's a little bit blown up, it's a little bit blurry, but for what it is, and especially compared to like, what was it on the PC 98 back in the day and stuff like that, and the Super Nintendo, I mean, it does look really good. The cutscenes are often shown in static, like animated things, and those do look really good. If you're familiar with like the Ys games and things like that, you'll kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. But it's not going to blow you away graphically. It really isn't. It's an old game. It's an old port of an old game. This port came out in 2009, so it's not going to win any beauty pageants or anything like that. But it does service the game well. And it's not ugly to look at. It's maybe just a little bland for nowadays. The audio is really, it's Sound Team JDK, some of the tracks are not as good as Ys tracks, but there's a couple tracks where you're just like, these guys are like the best, one of the best composers of video game music out there, and I was really impressed with a couple of the tracks. Sort of the main Brandish theme was really cool. It's like this very slow sort of violin, very reminiscent of Ys. And then, of course, when you get to the fortress and you have, the traditional, like, really big thumping, action songs, it really gets your blood pumping and makes exploring the fortress a lot of fun. But, yeah, Brandish, man, I don't know what else to say about it. It was a pretty big surprise. $20 on PSN, and you get about 15 to 20 hours of gameplay out of it. So, you know, it's at least, you know, $1 an hour. So, you know, it's a really fun game if it read up on it, because the control scheme can throw some people, and you can change the control scheme. I changed it so where when I hit the left or right on the D-pad, it actually turned the character, and then sidestepping was the L and R buttons. And that made it a bit more manageable, because when you play it with the default control scheme, it does feel really, really weird. And it does kind of take you a while to sort of wrap your head around how to play the game. But eventually, it really kind of clicks with you. And I'm super, like... I'm super happy that I played the game, because it's really a lot of fun, and it's actually making me want to download. There's an English translation of the Super Famicom version of Brandish 2, and even though that's an older version and it sort of has that nauseating screen turning that the older games had, I really want to download it and put it on my PSP Go and, you know, play that on my Super Nintendo emulator. So that's probably gonna be something I do. I don't know. I need to download the ROM and put the patch on it and everything. But, you know, I might play it later on in the year. But really, really surprised about this. And, you know, it really kind of makes me excited about Xseed again. Because for some reason, you know, I used to be a huge Xseed, like, everything they put out was gold. And then they started putting out some games that I wasn't so interested in. And, you know, Second Chapter has taken so long because it's just, that game's a nightmare to localize. And, you know, there's stories out there about what the localization team has gone through to try to get that game out. So Xseed has kind of, you know, dropped a little bit in my eyes. But this kind of, you know, makes me remember, ah, yes, there's a reason why I love this company. And it's their partnership with Falcom and bringing out games like this. Really happy that the West is getting a lot of these Falcom games, because they were a company that it just seemed like we kind of got a lot of their games kind of in a weird smattering, you know, but you know, with Xseed bringing out the East games and Legends of Heroes and things like that, and now Brandish, I think a lot of people are really, you know, stand up and taking notice of Falcom as one of the premier RPG companies out there. So anyway, that is it pretty much for this video. You know, it's one of those love it or hate it games. I don't know if anyone is really kind of ambivalent about Brandish. I know RPG Swagman loved it. I loved it. But it doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to love it. It's kind of a diamond in the rough type of game. And I would suggest giving it a shot. If you don't want to drop the $20 on the PSN version, maybe download the ROM of the Super Nintendo Brandish and see if it's even interesting to you, or read up on it. Like Hardcore Gaming 101 has a nice big article on like all 4 Brandish games. So that's something to read too, and maybe decide if you want to get into this or not. But I really am looking forward to eventually playing the Super Famicom version of Brandish 2. I don't know if there's a way to play Brandish 3, because it was a PC 98 and an IBM PC only game, and it was only released in Japan. So I don't know if there's a PC 98 emulator out there, and I don't know if anyone's translated the game itself. So, but yeah, definitely something to check out. Definitely a big surprise for 2015, and I don't know. I really have to sit down and think. Did I enjoy Persona 3 more than I enjoyed this? I don't know. I don't know, because this was it was a really great game, but I think the surprise of it, about how much I enjoyed it, really, you know, boosted it up a little bit. But anyway, that is it for this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.